We all get to a point in our adult grown lives where we realize that our kids are grown and they've moved out of the house. And now what you're experiencing is empty nest syndrome, where parents experience their kids growing up and getting out of the house, and now you're left alone with your other partner in the house, your spouse, your wife or husband, and trying to figure out how to navigate that as an adult now is difficult because now it's just you and the other person in the house and the kids are all gone. So, how do you navigate that in the second half of your life? We're going to talk about that now on Built Not Hacked. Hi, I'm Bruce. We've created this entire personality for ourselves that has been centered around our kids for so long that that's who we identify ourselves with. Okay, so if I have identified myself with my kids because I'm their dad and I'm the person that has for 18 years now helped them with their homework, put them to bed, helped on their laundry, cooked meals for them, brought them to all their baseball games and stuff like that. My entire life for the last 15 years or 18 years has been consumed with being a parent to my kids, right? And so I have three boys, and that's been 18 to 20 years of being dad. That's who my personality is. That's who my identity is. That's who I identify with. And being dad means that I do everything that centers around my kids, right? And you take them everywhere and you spend all this time with them and stuff like that. But how do we navigate the second half of our life where we're adults now who's uh, our kids have moved out of the house, and we have to recognize the fact that I don't have to be dad that way anymore. This is a transition period in your life where your kids move out of the house, and now your identity changes to the point where, like I said, yeah, you're always going to be mom or you're always going to be dad, but the second half of our life means that we have to recognize that we all go through transitions in our lives, right? So when I was an adolescent and very young, my transition period was growing up in my house, right? And then getting through school and then going to college was another transition period, and breaking away from my parents. So we all go through these transitionary periods in our lifetime, right? And so as adults now, what I have needed to recognize, and what I want all of you to recognize, is the fact that just because you're an empty nester and your kids have moved out of your house, it doesn't mean it's the end all be all, right? It's just another transitionary period in your life that you're going through, right? And I think that adults sometimes parents in particular, get so wrapped up in the fact that I've been a parent to these children for so long that I don't know what my identity is. I don't know who I am anymore, right? Because I've been mom or dad for so long that now that they've moved out of the house, um, it seems so empty, right? And I don't know how to cope with that, right? I don't know how to, like, because my day was filled up with running the kids here or there and making sure that they get up on time for school and all that stuff. And now when you get up in the morning, the house is quiet. It's completely quiet, right? Right. But I think that this period in your life, this beyond 50 period in your life, the second half of your life, is easier for you to adjust to this period when you realize that this is just another transition period for you. And this transitionary period for you is important, right? Because if you get so hung up in the fact that my kids are gone now and that was my entire life, that was my identity, and you can't move on from that, boy, you are going to be in for some tough times ahead. You really are, and I'm sorry to say that, but you really gotta try to identify who you are now. Who's Bruce going to be in the second half of his life, right? So this is the time when you have an opportunity to be able to make this transition and find hobbies that you've put off for a long time, right? So, say for an example, you weren't very good at cooking, but you wanted to have the time to be able to study a little bit and figure out how to do it. Now's a great time, right? You remember all those friends that you've put off for the last 18 to 20 years, right? And you've seen them maybe once a year. This is a great time to catch up on all these friendships that you've put off for all these years. You know that last movie that you decided not to go to because you had to run the kids to college or school or something like that? Start going to movies, right? Take up gardening. If you can't find out who you are in this next transition of life, you're going to have a lot of years where you're just inside your house staring at your four walls all day long, right? And that's not fun for everybody. But it doesn't mean that just because your kids are gone and you're going through this transition in your life right now, it doesn't mean that your kids are gone forever. It doesn't. Your kids are going to be in and out of your life, right? Some kids go to college and it doesn't work out for them, and they wind up coming back home. Okay, and that's okay. Some kids find out that trades are better for them than college was, but they felt like they had to go to school and they had to figure it out on their own, and that was a transitionary period for them. Okay, and just because your kids are gone, even if they stay away to school and all that stuff, kids still come back home, right? They still want mom and dad to do their laundry. They still have to come home for Christmas. They still have to come home for summer breaks and stuff like that. So it's not the end all be all just because your kids transition out of the house and you have become an empty nester in the second half of your life. Doesn't mean your kids are gone forever. So just recognize that this second half of your life is the life where we find ourselves again, right? We find ourselves again in the sense that, I think that everybody who's watching this right now can agree that at some point in your life, you've kind of lost who you were, right? You lost who you were in the sense that, your identity was mom or dad. And you have to find ways to find out who you are again in the second half of your life, right? And figure out who you are. Who is Bruce? What do I like, right? If I like working on cars or going fishing or going on hiking and doing more camping trips and traveling and stuff like that, well, now I have an opportunity to do all that stuff, right? And I think that sometimes parents get lost in the fact that they don't know how to identify themselves again because they've been taken out of their identity of who they were prior to either getting married or having kids and stuff like that, and they have a tough time trying to find their way back to their identity again, right? What makes them happy, what makes them get up in the morning, get out of bed and be motivated to do things like hobbies and whatever their interests are, whether it be travel and stuff like that. But don't let the fact that you've been focused on your kids for so long stop you from figuring out who your identity is again. Like I said, this is a time in your life where you have an opportunity to be able to do all of the things that you've been putting off, all of the things that you've used your kids as excuses not to do over the years, right? Like catching up on your friends and taking classes, right? Getting an education again. This is a great time for you to reinvent yourself in the second half of your life after your kids leave and you've become an empty nester. So initially, yeah, it's a time when you're depressed and you have second thoughts of sending your kids away to school or letting them leave the house and whatever. But you have to trust the process. You have to trust that everything that you've all the behaviors and discipline and things that you've instilled in your kids as they've been growing up is going to carry through with them for the rest of their lives. And even things that they're going to pass down to their own children generationally, right? And so don't be sad. Don't be sad. Just recognize that this is a transition period of your life. It's a transition period for their life. And it's one that you had to go through before you had kids. And so let them have an opportunity to experience this and live life and go through this transition of theirs. You've done your job as a parent, right? Just recognize you've done a good job. You've allowed them to be able to grow up and move on. So think about that for a second. Think about what you're going to view this as a second half of your life after 50, with your emptiness, feelings, and ways that you can go about trying to, subdue those lonely thoughts and sad thoughts that you have about your kids not being around anymore. They're not gone forever. Give them a call, right? They'll be glad to hear from you, right? And until next time, I just want to remind everybody that life isn't hacked, it's built. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.